Hey guys, ever since I did a video about the Sonic 2 Ashura glitch, people have been bugging me to do a video on the Sonic 1 spike glitch, and I figured I would oblige, because this is a very controversial glitch. It's notable in that there's a debate over whether it's really a glitch or whether it's actually the developer's intent. So in today's episode we'll be taking a deep dive into the code to figure out which side is correct, and I'll be eating this cheesecake. That's not a cheesecake. So what is the Sonic 1 spike bug? Let's take a look. Start up your Sonic 1 tape. Either of the two revisions that were released, 00 or 01 will work. And start off in Green Hill Zone, and all you gotta do is make your way over here. And you see the set of spikes right here? Yeah, you just jump on there. Oh shit, I died. There you go, that's the bug. It wasn't easy. And there you have it. So, if that doesn't seem interesting, let's review a little bit of the mechanics. Who the fuck are you? What the fuck is this? I'm you from a month later when I'm finally finishing this video, and I'm here to present you the alternate viewpoint, which is that this is a bug. Actually, I'm a butterfly, but that's a kind of bug, I guess. How'd you get in my fucking... So let's recap how Sonic games work. Sonic collects rings, and the rings go up, and if Sonic gets hurt without any rings, he dies. So real quick, when Sonic dies, a sound plays, he changes to his death animation. Gravity still applies, but he's set a very specific Y acceleration so that he bounces up a little bit. And his routine counter is set to his death routine, which means that he falls through the level, he falls off the bottom of the screen, the camera doesn't follow him, and some sprites stop animating, like monitors or badniks. But if Sonic is hurt and he has rings, he goes into his hurt animation. It's pretty straightforward. He flies back, and while he's flying back, he's in the state called Sonic Hurt. It's like a jerk back that you can't control. And he leaves this state when he lands on the ground. Once he lands on the ground, he's given 2 seconds of temporary invincibility. Temporary invincibility is very important. It's in a lot of games, and it's basically there to make sure that you don't continuously get hurt in quick succession by an object that you might partially be inside of or still touching. And this mechanic is amazing because when the rings scatter, you can literally just get a second chance by collecting any of them. The more rings you had, the more second chances you have. And the interplay between the temporary invincibility and the positioning of the rings makes it not a big deal when you get hit. Get hit, grab some rings, keep going. And this is not the only way that Sonic can die, by the way. Sonic can die by getting crushed between 2 objects, between an object and the level, or my favorite, hitting the bottom of the screen. Real quick rant, I hate the word bottomless pits in Sonic games. I understand the word bottomless pits. In a game like Mario or DuckTales or any other game where you literally fall off the bottom of the screen, like I'm okay with calling that a bottomless pit because you don't know where the bottom is. Like, he keeps going, like, you know, the level just resets. But in the Sonic game, there's a very clear bottom of the fucking level. You literally bounce off of it. I mean, like, come on, look at this. Bottomless, what the fuck? Notice that when Sonic flies back, he actually goes right through the rings. His ability to collect rings doesn't return until he goes back into his normal state when he hits the ground. So here, even though the screen is full of rings, Sonic flies right through them. A lot of people could consider this unfair because why can't he collect rings? It's Sonic. But also note that because Sonic didn't touch the ground, he didn't go back into his normal state and gain temporary invincibility. And the next set of spikes just kills him right off the bat without caring about his current state. I mean, I don't think that's right. That's not fair. He goes right through the rings. Like, what are you gonna do about this? Like, you're locked out of the controls. I mean, come on. So I don't understand. Why do you think that this is a bug? So, like, this could totally be intentional. Like, maybe they just want the spikes to be harder. I mean, like, they look pretty fucking sharp and pointy. Why do you think it's a bug? The reason why I think it's a bug is because it was fixed less than a year later in Sonic 2. Look at this. Look at this. I can just walk on here. As long as I'm getting rings, I can stay on here. I mean, I think this right here is what most people expect. First of all, if you want to talk about Sonic 2, the spike behavior was changed very late in the Sonic 2 cycle. All of the betas we have the spike bug. The levels were clearly designed with it in mind. Like, look at the spacing. Does that remind you of anything? This part is supposed to be hard. Maybe they just decided to change the behavior. I mean, they changed the look of the spikes. I mean, how do you know that's even supposed to be the same thing? Maybe it's just really sharp, horrible spikes that kill you, and not so horrible spikes you can stand on for a little bit. They're not two different things because, first of all, it's the same object ID in the code, and second of all, aside from the fix, it's the same code. Let's take a look. Look at this. This is the same. Look at this. This is the same. Here's Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Look at this. It's the same. And on top of that, it was patched in Sonic 1, in revision 02. There were only 2 revisions released, and this bug exists in both of them. No, there's a revision 02. It's the Sonic Mega Collection. It's the ROM that's embedded in the Sonic Mega Collection for PC. Okay, I know about revision 2. It is a hex edit. Let me show you the code here. Okay, so this is the spike object here. As always, this week's disassembly is brought to you by these awesome people. If you take a look here, the original code is here. And this is the fix that they put in revision 2. It's a hex edit. So how the original developers actually changed the behavior in Sonic 1, they wouldn't have had to hex edit the ROM. They would have changed the code by inserting a couple lines, and they would have reassembled the code, and all the addresses would have updated, and the ROM would be a little bit larger, but it would be elegant. Instead, what happened was someone came in post and actually hacked in the fix through a hex edit. So at the beginning of the game, as with most Motorola 68K program ROMs, is the interrupt vector table, which tells the CPU where to jump, like when there's an error, like an illegal instruction, an address error, a bus error, but also on interrupts like H blank and V blank and whatever. So at the end of, the interrupt table is just a bunch of unused entries here, and normally there'd be, 8 at the end here, but instead in revision 2, they've used a hex editor to relocate part of the spike code to here at the beginning of the ROM, so that they have enough room to put the fix in the spike code. So in other words, they took this chunk out, put it here, wrote the fix on top of what was there, which they moved over here, and then they jump back to here to run this part when they need to. It's really shady, and it's obviously not their original intent. This happened many years later. And on top of it, not everyone playing Sonic Mega Collection is even going to have the fix, because if you're using Sonic 1 with spin dash mode, the behavior reverts back to the original. It goes unpatched. I think the reason why it was fixed in Sonic Mega Collection is because the people testing Sonic Mega Collection, the people building it, were familiar with all 4 Sonic games. And in the majority of the Sonic series, including most of the games people play first, most people don't play Sonic 1 first. Most people I know have played Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 and Knuckles first before they've played Sonic 1. Sonic 1 was a less popular game. So most people are familiar with the latter behavior of the spike. So when they encounter it in Sonic 1 and Sonic 1 only, in a pack that has all of these games that otherwise behave the same way, yeah, they probably considered it a bug and they probably changed it to become more uniform. That doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't the intention of the developers to fucking kill Sonic when he gets impaled on spikes twice consecutively. No other bugs from the original Sonic 1 were fixed, and there was a lot of really fucking embarrassing bugs that they should have fixed if they were going to take the time to fix bugs. Like this one here where they forgot the press start button text because they were too busy hacking in some fucking congratulatory Easter egg to themselves. Or this one here at the end of Labyrinth Zone, where the signpost just doesn't load. Or even if it does load, the game crashes if you're panned down. Like, what kind of fucking shit is this? I've never seen a Sonic game crash this way before. If the fact that it was fixed is your only indication that it was a bug, then obviously you're not familiar with the other bugs here. I think you should look at the code. It's worth noting that the spike object hurts Sonic in a way that's different from every other object in the game. Most objects use object collision type. Collision type is a special value that all objects have that tell the game 2 things. Number 1, how it should impact Sonic when he touches it, and number 2, what the size of the hitbox is. The behavior is stored in the upper 2 bytes, so there's 4 possibilities. There's actually 5, because when the entire collision type is 0, it's treated as if there's no collision. So there's no collision checking if the collision type is 0. And on the spikes, the collision type is 0, because it's not the collision type that defines how Sonic interacts with the spikes. Most objects that Sonic interacts with have a collision type that's not 0. Collision types $80 through DF dollars hurt Sonic. They just hurt Sonic, just hurt Sonic. He gets hurt. So this is how the lava works. This is how the big ball in Eggman's machine at the end of Green Hill Zone works. But it's not how the spikes work. It's very possible that it hurts Sonic in a very specific way because it was intended to hurt Sonic in a very specific way. Oh, come on, that's bullshit. It has to use special collision handling. Let's take a look at what happens if we fix the bug, but instead of fixing the bug the way they fixed the bug, let's fix the bug the way he thinks we should fix the bug by using object collision type, which is how everything else hurts Sonic. So let's try that. Let's see what happens if we do that, shall we? So first of all, the first thing I've done is if you look here, First thing in Spike Hurt, I just branch right to Spike Display. So in other words, I just skip right over all of the Spike's hurting code, and I just leave in its collision code. So now let's set the object collision type to 81. Hold up, I gotta explain all this shit on the screen. I found a better emulator, it's called BizHawk. You've probably heard of it. It's not the best emulator. In fact, it crashes a lot. It's really bad. But it has Lewis support, so I wrote a whole bunch of shit. So now we can see in real time all of the objects in the object table. We can see their object type, their subtype, their routine counter, what object it is, their position, their render flags, their status flags, and their collision response, also known as the object collision type. The different colors indicate different collision types, which we'll talk about later, and some of the data is overlaid onto the objects as they're drawn so you can see what's going on. So now let's set the object collision type to 81, which is the appropriate collision type for an object of this size that hurts Sonic, and let's see what happens. Well, this isn't exactly what you'd expect, is it? So the spike has to have its own collision code because it has a very specific shape. Not only does it not hurt Sonic from the sides, only the spiky part. In other words, it's only hurting Sonic from one end, which collision type 81 doesn't do. But on top of it, the spike object is used in two different orientations. It can be used vertically or horizontally. An object collision type doesn't have any directionality to it. So motherfucker, the spikes have to hurt Sonic using custom collision code because the injury plane is custom in that object. So that isn't a reason why it was intended to be different. Okay, Smarty Pants, why don't you show us what the other collision types do, just for completeness. Okay, so if we set the object collision type of the spikes to 0-1, then it behaves like a badnik, in that if Sonic touches it, any part of it while rolling, he will pop it. This is also the same collision response that monitors used, but they have special handling to not create the stupid animal that flies away, or runs away, or jumps away. If we set the collision type to C1, it behaves completely solidly. You can see here that it behaves similar to like one of those big boulders that just sits around and does nothing. If we set the object collision type to 41, the most interesting thing happens, which is this. So just like he said earlier, when you crash the game in the Sonic 1, you get a really nice crash handler. In this case, you can't see it here because it's written off the side of the frame, but it says illegal instruction, and it's giving me the RAM address of where that illegal instruction is. I can press C to actually like try to continue past that, and if I press C enough, I'll actually jump execution into a part of memory where it actually can continue. A couple things. So aside from the fact that the debug text has wiped out the lives counter and some of the tiles in plane A where the message used to be, the object that was crashing, the spike object, seems to have turned into a completely different object and is now falling in free fall. Apparently gravity applies to it, but it has no code to detect a floor, so it's just flying indefinitely off the level, and eventually the acceleration is actually going to overflow and it's going to fly back up and then fly back down. And it's actually really funny. There's a couple places in Sonic games where this happens, and it's always interesting to see. This object collision type causes the object's routine counter to be incremented to the next routine. It's used for a lot of special objects like bumpers, but in this case the spikes don't have another routine, so it crashes the game because the execution jumps into the middle of some data. As you know, collision type 00 means you go right through the object. So I actually played the game a little bit in this mode just to see how integral the behavior of the spikes really is to the game, and I noticed a couple things. If you look at all the levels that the spikes are in, there's only a couple instances where the spikes are placed in multiples. There's a lot of places where there's a single set of spikes here, or here, or here, or even single spikes themselves here, here, just as an obstacle, just to keep you from going someplace you shouldn't, just from clipping into some wall that you'd otherwise clip into because the game is horribly designed, or just to ruin your speed. Whether it's on its side or whether it's facing you, it's just there to ruin your speed. But like I said, most of these are single placements. In other words, not enough consecutive spikes to cause the bug. Now, there's a couple places that are notable where the bug can happen. The first two occasions are right here at the very beginning of the first level. It's almost as if they wanted you to experience this. And it's interesting to note that this is in the first 30 seconds of the most commonly played level. So It's hard to say that they didn't notice this. It's odd to think that no one would have run into this in any of their playtesting, especially the people unfamiliar with the game. No one had played Sonic before, so you'd think a larger number of people than not would hit, you know, a big obstacle that's right here. And there's not just one, but 2, 3 chances here to hit this bug. I really don't think that they didn't encounter this in their testing. And then all of the other places where there's multiple spikes back to back in any of the levels where they are, they're there for 2 reasons. They're either there to signify stay away. Like for example here, if you just kept going, the screen's gonna kill you anyway. Or like here where there's nothing down here, and you're just gonna die. There's only one case where they ever really bluff with the spikes, and that's here in this secret. A secret so obscure that they changed it in Sonic Mania. Everywhere else where there's a huge series of spikes, you either would have died anyway, or there's really no reason to be there. So my hypothesis is that spikes are an evolution. I think early in the game, they were used for the same mechanic as bottomless pits. I hate the word bottomless pits. Possibly before there were bottomless pits, but if you notice, a lot of these are in bottomless pits. In fact, this one right here, these spikes aren't even visible in the game. You can't even see them unless you're in debug mode. Why would they be here? They're under a bridge that you wouldn't be able to get through anyway. Is it because these needed to be here? Was it because it was just a visual deterrent? I mean, the placement of the spikes, it may be very intentional, especially this cadence. Look at this width here. Look at these widths. How do you not say that this is intentional? Look at the height of this is not the height of this. They didn't just copy and paste this. This was placed here on purpose. Why do I think it was intentional? One reason why I still believe that this is very intentional. It's got nothing to do with how Sonic gets hurt, how he should get hurt, or how they're placed. There's one place in the code that really makes me feel like they had something in mind, and that is the sound effect. With the exception of Sonic drowning, this is the only exception to Sonic's death sound. Sonic's death sound is iconic, it's familiar, but this sound right here was put here on purpose. It's the only object that kills Sonic with a different sound, and I think it's because it was meant to kill him in a different way. Of course it plays a different sound, it runs completely different code, we've already established that. May I direct your attention to the code? The sound effect for the spike, wince, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, is not in the spike code. It's not in the spike object. It's not in the place where Sonic's special hurt handling is for the spikes. It is all the way over here in Kill Sonic. If you take a look here, it sets the normal death sound to D0, and then it checks to see if the object that killed Sonic is the spikes. And it's here in every game, it makes a different sound, this is in a completely different location than everything else we've talked about. That's all I'm saying. Maybe it is all of the above, maybe it is a complicated scenario. What do you think? Is it a bug? Is it intentional? Was it intentional that it became a bug retroactively because the later behavior was better? We'll never know. So here's a bonus feature for you. Earlier we went over the Sonic hurt routine. Well, there's 4 other routines that Sonic can be in that have kind of interesting different quirks about them. So I mapped the 4 buttons on the digital D-pad here to the 4 interesting routines for Sonic. Hurt, death, wait for level to end, and reinitialize, which will jump back to control. So let's have some fun with it. Sonic has 5 routines. The first one is initialize. Almost every object has an initialize routine. And Sonic doesn't really do anything peculiar if you re-initialize him. It'll just go right back into his control state. His control state is what you're used to him being in all the time. You can control him by inputting whatever on the keypad unless his control is locked or he's being controlled by another object, but for the most part, whenever you're in control of Sonic or whenever he's, you know, being adulterated around the level, he's in the control mode. We went over Sonic Hurt. It's when he's flying back and pretty much you have no control over him and nothing happens to him until he touches the ground, and once he touches the ground he begins flashing, he gets his invincibility, and he goes immediately back into his control state. There's really not much interesting about Sonic Hurt. There's a routine called Wait for the Level to End, and this is the routine that Sonic goes into briefly while we're waiting for the time in between the score counting down and the actual fade out of a level. It's worth noting that if you put Sonic into this wait for the level to end state when the level isn't ending, it actually underflows the counter and you will end the level after 65,535 frames. But that's actually several hours, and there's no way that I'm gonna sit here and pan and coic the camera for that long just to see Sonic eventually fade out and the level start over again. And then the most fun routine is the death routine. For starters, you get interesting looking results because when Sonic is dead, the camera doesn't pan, but when Sonic's alive, the camera pans. Additionally, you can keep dying Sonic over and over again to bounce him off the screen more and more, give him more Y velocity. You can combine the camera panning with the bouncing off the bottom of the screen to get Sonic higher and higher. I call this death jumping. It's really fucking amazing. I'm sorry this video took so long to make. There will be more quicker in the future, I promise. Special thanks to all the people that asked me to do this video, and to all the people that are gonna get butthurt about it. If you like more videos like this, tell me below. I have no idea what the fuck you people like. At all. There's one guy that really likes it when I play with phones, but I'm pretty sure that's not everyone.